columnist for ZDNet, which we try not to hold against him at CIO Magazine. That's a rival publishing company. I'm surprised they're still in business, but you know, if they're
you
still
are
there,
so gracious. You're overly gracious.
God bless them. I wasn't sure Time Magazine was still in business, so you know, I'm just not really up on things. He has also written thought leadership reports for our sister company IDC on project portfolio management, CRM, social business, and cloud computing. So I think we're ready up here. I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Let's have some fun. And remember, 6 CIOs in New York. We want 7 here in Boston. Take it away.
All right. Well, let's see. You know, I think Val and I do this every week, and usually what we do is we have to do a kind of a remote fist bump. And the reason is that we're sitting about 3 feet apart, but they're separate cameras, and in the middle you can't see. So I think we need to do a fist bump that is an actual fist bump. So
you really want to start with a fist bump?
I think that we should start with a fist bump.
Sure.
It's like, there you go.
It's tradition, sorry.
So we're here with 2 very interesting folks. Michael is a venture capitalist, and Brook is CTO of a company established back in the early 1800s. Michael, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm really billed as a VC, but actually spent 2/3 of my career as an operating guy, having built a series of businesses. And I like to share the most important thing about my background. I've learned most from 3 things. One is from failing. The second is from predicting, and many times getting that wrong. And the third is from teaching, where I often end up learning more than I teach. And so the joy of being involved in things like this is an opportunity to learn in regard to what this audience might be interested in. So it doesn't matter what I have to say. I'm very interested to know what you have as questions, and look forward to hearing from you.
Great. And Brook?
Sure. I'm excited to be here. Thanks. My name is Brook Colangelo. I'm the EVP and CTO for Houghton, Mifflin, Harcourt. I came to the company about 1.5 years ago, and I oversee sort of 2 sides of the house here, which we've brought in as one technology team. One is the enterprise CIO space, and that's about how we make our enterprise faster, quicker, and more nimble. Second piece is about how we deliver products and how we deliver our content to customers. We're a world-class K-12 education company, and really sort of changing the dynamic here in this entire industry is in a big change, and so I think technology is core to that, and that's been exciting. And then prior to that, for the first term of the administration, I was the CIO for the White House.
Oh, that's very cool. Second CIO Magazine event where we've had CIOs of the White House on our panel, so privileged to have you here.
Yeah,
that's great.
Excited to be here.
Thank you very much. So, Michael, 2/3 as an entrepreneur and 1/3 as a VC.
Yeah.
You know, I would love to know in the audience, you know, where do you invest and what are some of the interesting areas that you're pursuing right now?
So I'm trying.
Where and why? Where and why?
Yeah.
The why is actually often more important than the
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get to that agenda. So first of all, the why, given this is a CIO audience, is probably just so important. Most of what I hear from CIOs, and I spend a lot of my time with particularly Fortune 1000 CIOs, but some SMB too, is they're being asked to do more with less, of course, but they're also being asked to contribute to the top line, to generate new revenues, to generate new products and services and so forth. And increasingly, the only way to do that is to actually get to their core competencies and effectively to ensure that they're not doing anything that would distract from that. So that leads to outsourcing anything that's not a core competence. So that's the why. Now, let's talk about what the what is. The what that comes out of that is that people are expected to figure out how to get those outsourced services very efficiently. And that's leading to the cloud. Why the cloud? Well, if you think about it for a second, everything is becoming available as a service. And this is how I invest. This is my investment thesis. It has been for nearly 11 years now. So everything as a service was not really a thesis that people could get to grips with back 11 years ago. But the concept was very simple, is that if you listen to what people wanted to do, they want everything available as a service so that they can select specifically what they outsource, or what I call outservice, to other people. Let's pick an example. How many people in this audience love doing HR? Not. I don't know anybody who loves doing HR, other than the HR professionals. And even then, in most businesses, HR is not a core competence. So it's a classic example of something that is ripe for outservicing. And by the way, it's been outserviced for years, or outsourced for years in the form of things like ADP. But increasingly, through everything as a service, through cloud services, everything in HR can be done as a service. Whether it's, for example, recruiting, sourcing people from LinkedIn, it's managing candidates through particular systems, or its benefits. I mean, I could mention all sorts of companies here, of course, that are enabling those kinds of services. But in the end, the outservicing of HR is enabling any organization who does that to cut back to what their core competence is, whether that be manufacturing or product development, or logistics. And so the thesis that I invest behind is very simple. It's everything as a service, and I'm looking for any part of the potential value chain of any business that can be created as a cloud service. And how I can invest in that is usually at 3 layers: applications, the infrastructure behind it, and ultimately all of the support services that enable that to be delivered at scale and used by CIOs or line of business users in the enterprise.
Excellent.
That makes sense?
It makes sense. You have some incredible slide shares that speak to your investment thesis and where you focus. I mean, thousands and thousands of views. So I suggest you look up Michael's slide shares. And I believe in one, you listed like 9 inhibitors to the cloud.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a pretty long list, and you had pretty deep paragraphs per. So you talk about, core competency, focusing on that, and outsourcing what's not a focus area. But can you talk a little bit about these inhibitors?
Sure. So I'm going to shortcut because I don't think we want to spend the whole session giving a slideshow presentation.
Sure.
I'll just say that if you Google future cloud computing, you'll find it's the broadest industry survey. So 72 collaborators, everybody from Amazon and Microsoft, and sort of smaller tier players like, for example, Hardware and others all contribute to this. So it's a very broad survey. It's by far and away the broadest industry. So these are not my thoughts. So just to be clear, all I'm really doing is bringing this data together. So where these 9 inhibitors come from is the customers of all of those 72 collaborators. And what we hear will not surprise you, but I'll pick one that will surprise you. So one of the inhibitors is absolutely nothing to do with technology. And it is the alignment of the organization to adopting these new technologies. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's interesting listening to the Falcon story. So it's fun listening to Jack. I mean, obviously he's got a classic challenge. He can, for example, bring in a new mobile app, but he's got to get his franchisees to adopt it. Well, now imagine you have that in your GE, and you have several different lines of business several different businesses, and then dozens of different lines of business across, many continents, etc. It doesn't matter if somebody introduces a brilliant new mobile app or a great new cloud service. The number one inhibitor is how do you get the user to actually adopt it. So we were talking a little bit earlier, so I'm going to give the stage over to Brook because I think he's got something really interesting to say about this. The real challenge is actually making all of these technologies usable at a level that a customer, in this case, an internal employee or maybe an external customer, can actually engage with them and really adopt them quickly.
Absolutely.
And so that has finally dawned on people as being the biggest inhibitor for all the great technology that's underneath it. And I know, Brook, you have something to say on this.
Yeah, Brook, your company was founded in 1832.
Yes.
And here you are, very involved with technology and innovation, but at a company that I'm sure has very well-established processes.
Yeah.
So adoption, I'm sure, is a key issue.
Yeah, and I think the whole point that Michael's saying here is that this entire industry, this entire ecosystem has changed, and that this opportunity of these new companies and what to look at is, and what our job is totally different. I believe that as a leader in IT, CIO, CTO, your job is to change and deliver new technology and new functionality to your customer at least every 3 months. But the problem is you can't do that if you have to do an 18-month selection, a bid process, all of that structure. And so the better part of this is this new way in, which is your customer is pulling this stuff in. Right. As we were saying earlier, I'm not even looking at storage technology, not because these big storage companies got in and I answered one of the cold calls. I'm looking at storage technology because hundreds of my customers already downloaded something and are using a technology for free, and I just got to a point of whoa, we got to use this. And the question was then should we run a pilot? And the point is, no, the pilot's done. Right. The pilot's already been run. It's successful. The usage is up there, and so So this changes that whole role, that whole conversation, both with the sales team of the tech companies as well as how you work and how you think about new technology to bring into a company or how to move a company faster. If you have to do something with a day's training, you've lost, right?
So adoption in this case is built in because the adoption took place before you got involved, in a sense.
Yeah, the pilot got run before I got involved. Now, I mean, if I was a very Machiavellian CIO, I would start planting ideas into the enterprise. And it's not actually a bad idea to get technologies that I want to get in planted and driving. But unfortunately, I can't, at this point, my job is a curation of this technology. And that I feel like that curator word is the hottest term now in post-2010. And this idea that we're curating new technologies with a total architecture towards that future. I mean, there is a serious job into what is that future and how do you make it happen, but a lot of your pilot, your beta, your alpha testing is happening already in less controlled environments.
But what about security? All of the, in a sense, this is what you're describing is sort of anti-traditional IT-like.
Consumerization of IT?
The consumerization, yeah.
I mean, the digital IQ of your customers and employees are so much higher in the last decade, whereby we talk about shadow IT, we talk about marketeers firing up a service if IT can't deliver, and of course cloud has enabled that. So the combination of mobile, social, apps, data, does IT or CIO, CTOs have a choice but to understand the trends and respond as quickly as possible to stay relevant?
I mean, my thought is if you're going to sit there and be the no guy, good luck and look for a new job, right? Because eventually the powers that be will overthrow you. Mm-hmm. The second thing is, absolutely security is of the utmost importance, but I would say that and I would also say the baseline of security knowledge of employees and of your customers, that's skyrocketed. Privacy awareness and concerns over data usage is through the roof. In that I am generally happy about sort of that is a standard base that has increased, especially in this last 2 or 3 years. And then I think our job is that data security, that data safety. Now, I would also say that as the curator, as the true architect of our tech solutions in the company, it's about also bringing that radical simplification and architecting this. That's great that this business unit needed that service, but guess what? You can't talk to the other business units because all your crap's in one application and all your other stuff's in all these others. So let's now curate this and let's architect a solution where everybody can work and think about doing this a lot faster and more nimble.
So then if we look at this from an ecosystem standpoint, you're investing in these services that his users, that presumably are easy to use based on consumer style software, that as a result his users are adopting, which is now forcing someone like Brook to adopt a very different stance than a traditional CIO might.
Well, the word forcing isn't quite what I
No, it's not quite the right term, I guess. But
coercing.
I think you make a great point, which is we don't try not to ever invest in technology for technology's sake. So we're always trying to understand what impact will this make. So let's tackle a really thorny issue that Brook just brought up, because people always talk about the easy stuff. One of the hardest things is trust.
Yeah.
Okay, so security. I happen to grow up in the security world at Symantec, and I don't do any security investments. You might say, well, why don't I do that? Well, because I don't think people get up in the morning to do security. They get up in the morning to do their job. So I actually can't get excited about security anymore. It's great. It's a great place to make money. But where I really get excited is when you can enable things that were not possible before. Let's talk about that in the context of trust. People will say, well, we don't want you to collect my data because it's something that's extremely personal, and the more you connect about me, the more exposed I am. Then I'll say, okay. So when you're browsing on a site, you don't want us to remember what you purchased last time, or what your size is, or indeed where to ship this. And they say, no, of course we want you to remember that. So what you realize is that, in fact, if you can get this balance right between trust and obviously utilization of data, you can actually enable things that were just impossible before, cloud or cloud services and personalization and commerce and all these other things. And so what my job is to do is to invest in things that were impossible without cloud or fill in the blanks, personalization or fill in the blanks, digital marketing, whatever. so that when a consumer comes along and they work with, say, or a vendor comes along, excuse me, and works with Brook, Brook says, well, anybody at Houghton Mifflin is going to want this because it enables something that was just not possible before. It improves our experience for our customers.
Right.
It makes our employees more productive. We generate more revenue. We do it with less cost. Why wouldn't we do this? That's my job.
Absolutely. Would companies like Uber be an example of service where you've combined smart devices, mobile, and cloud, introduce a whole level of convenience, and there's a trust element, and
Actually, Uber's a fantastic example of a lot of things, but I'm going to pull out one, so thanks for the opportunity. So this is an example of something that's impossible without cloud. So that's the exact phrase I use. Not amazing because of cloud.
Impossible without cloud.
So let me explain why. The first wave of cloud is what I call transition. The first front, the cloud front. And it was a transition of things like HR or CRM or e-commerce to vendors from ATG transitioning to Demandware or Siebel transitioning to a Salesforce. The second cloud front, which is only just starting, is exemplified by Uber. And it
10 years later. Is that a fair? Because Salesforce.com 2003 to me is maybe
11 since I wrote that thesis, but I think it's probably even 12 since people started thinking about it. So it just takes a long time. We'll come back to how long it takes in a moment. So the second cloud front is what I call the reimagination of applications through cloud services. So what's an example? The services that are available today that we take for granted are location services, payment services. They are things like communication services. And what's born out of it is apps like Uber, which just would never be possible were it not for the fact that I can take a mobile device app, instantly pinpoint my location, instantly communicate with a nearby driver, instantly connect to and validate that I have a payment to book that car, and then boom, make the transaction. It's impossible without the cloud.
That's true.
Now that's exciting. That's the second cloud front. And just to give people a sense of how extraordinary this is, there are 11,000 APIs today. When I first started doing my survey, there are a few dozen. 11,000 APIs. Now think about the permutations and combinations of applications you could create with 11,000 APIs without you writing a single line of code, by the way. So, most CIOs I talk to today are thinking about, well, how do I develop something? I say stop. How do you avoid developing something and instead recombine what's already there and create something of what's already available to you from the cloud?
You talking open source, or are you talking?
Well, open source is also an exciting component of it. I won't go there for today. I will if you want, but I want to make
Sure. So Chromebooks in K-12. I was at Suffolk University. One of the law professors had the students text questions during lecture, because they were uncomfortable raising their hands, not like this audience, and the professor could see the questions and morph the lecture based on a wearable texting technology. So I feel massive disruption in terms of adaptive learning and apps and mobile and cloud in K-12 and higher ed. Do you see that transforming the way you think about bringing technology and shaping your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technology is core to our business now, and we know that combined with great teachers and great educators and phenomenal school systems or anything, that teaching is going to happen anywhere and anyhow now, and that is no longer a situation where it is a student in a classroom, right? And it's akin to our other services, speaking like Michael just said about what's happening also in the world of cloud services. You want to learn anywhere. You want to read anywhere. You want to get your email anywhere. You want to experience this. And now in K-12, you want to do that. And then matched with the power of powerful APIs on adaptive learning, on different technologies, on making collaboration happen within a classroom or having collaboration happen between classroom to classroom. Yeah, makes sense. And making that accessible and scalable too, so that, think about all the different possibilities there. That's what actually gets me up every morning about sort of how we can change for the better. That's cool. This experience, this engagement. Now you have a generation that was born without without the idea that touch technology never existed or mobile, right? This constant need for it where we have that constant need, but we can remember when we used to have a flip phone, and how do we do that? But this mindset now is just so exciting and has such a true opportunity to make really lasting results through different ways. And And I just think that the opportunity there is phenomenal. And building off what you said about APIs, we think very similar in that same sense. And not only just, how do I not build a new internal app? What can I figure out? How can I reuse and redeploy some other smart stuff that someone else has solved this problem for? And how do you do this in the education world? How do you connect? How do you allow a teacher or a student who has a great idea to connect to us, and we can expand upon that? Or how do we build on this in this bigger ecosystem so that we can provide different services in a really differentiated learning process?
So it seems like there are, for both of you in a sense, it seems like there are three factors that are coming together. So we have the investment in these types of services, number one. We have the disruption that's taking place in the environment, which is changing your business. And then you have the change in that's basically the talent pool, who have this growing expectation that software is going to function in a certain way. And it seems like you're both looking at those three things, but from the investment side and the purchasing side.
Yeah, and I think you got to just ride that wave. It's the exciting wave, right? This idea that you have either a new customer base that's hungry for it, or a new internal customer that's hungry for that change, and a marketplace that's there, right? I mean, I can't imagine life without Uber, right? I love it.
Yeah, it's true.
Right?
It's true. Yeah, absolutely.
I know, until your credit card statement arrives at the end of the month.
Wow. Too convenient. Yeah. Should have walked.
But that idea, but this opportunity there that no longer do I have to go look at a sort of buy storage as that example. I don't have to buy a $2 million device to solve this problem in my multi-office location. I can just hire a service for $5 or $10 a month per user that can solve this. And guess what? If that service stinks, I can cancel that and replace it. Absolutely. No longer are these 3 or 5 year contracts. 3 or 5 year contract is dead, in my opinion. I'm looking at 2, maybe 3 at the max, and always an out clause in this, because it should be a pay-as-you-go model.
You mean you don't like 3-year implementation cycles where you go to finance and you say, well, tell us what you need, because 3 years from now you're going to get it.
That's a waterfall mentality in life. We're an agile life now. I think the entire world is built on this agile mentality now. That one, I ask for storage. When am I getting it? Not when will I define my requirements? When will we submit them? When will we go to RFP? We're an agile environment, right? Because right now, if I was sitting here and I wanted storage, I would open the App Store and I would start looking for a storage app. Right? This workforce, this mindset, and this is cascading everywhere. This is not just a sort of in development or in engineering. And I think it's the same with my customers. My customers have requests on features and systems. I may not always have to build them, because I can always use an API to plug into someone else who's already done it. And I can do this faster and respond a lot more agile through that, and do this through those users' eyes so that we can move quicker.
We need to get questions.
Comments. Until we get a question, I want to talk a little bit about, so Michael, you talked about focusing on your core competencies, and I think in order to reach productivity, it's important to scale out and scale up. And so I'm going to go back to the open source topic a little bit. I believe it was one of your blogs I read, venture capital investments in 2011, nearly 400 million, and we're going to exceed $1 billion in open source this year. Why is it important for CIOs to think about the benefits of open source so they can improve execution velocity or agility within their organization?
Okay, so again, because there's a very detailed presentation out there on the future of open source, I'm going to take a piece that's not often talked about, which I'm surprised when I talk to CIOs that few of them really understand. And an example of an organization that really does understand it is Fidelity. And what they get is that for recruiting and retaining talent, open source is critical. Now let's just stop and think about why is that. Well, it turns out that employees today in developing, for example, any kind of system, whether it's internal or external, want to be involved with the latest technologies. And some of the greatest innovation is happening in open source. So for example, in big data, it's Hadoop, or if you looked at, for example, what's going on in the 3D world, 3D technologies, 3D printing, all happening in open source. For many of these different areas, for example, collaboration, some of the greatest technologies, again, in open source. Projects like Drupal, for example, which are back. There are just so many innovations happening first in open source. So developers want to work on the latest, greatest thing, and usually that's in open source. That's the first thing. The second thing is they want to contribute back.
Right.
The workforce, Gen X, Gen Y today, really cares about making a difference.
Sure.
And so if you're going to retain the best developers, they're going to want to contribute to open source projects. And so in many instances, what we've seen is open source maturing to a point where, wise CIOs are thinking about how do they make open source a core part of their DNA? How do they actually not only use it, but contribute back to it? That's a big shift, by the way. In the last year, I started that survey 8 or 9 years ago. And again, open source was sort of, relatively new at that time. But today it's in its sort of, maturing phase.
Yeah.
Sure.
And yet there's still, great innovation happening.
So recruitment, retention, and also personal branding for the developer.
Branding and by the way, many enterprises are now themselves getting tremendous kudos for the fact that they've contributed to projects. So even competitors, for example, in the auto industry, contributing to the Gemini initiative to cut costs on things like the development of the electronics within the car industry. So it's a fascinating and vital part of the next generation of IT.
How many CIOs in the room use open source as part of their development strategy? Okay, not a lot. So it's.
More raising their hands.
Okay, all right. All right. But yeah, again, another plug for an incredible slide share from Michael that you definitely want to take a look at. That speaks to the research. I'm
wondering how many people in the audience are finding this level of change and disruption to traditional IT processes as Brook was describing inside Houghton Mifflin. I mean, it seems to me what you're doing is more on the cutting edge than the industry as a whole, industry of CIOs. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about that?
Comments?
Nobody?
All right. Later in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So can we do a kind of a rapid fire comments on a set of technology categories and get your input? And we'll start with social and collaboration.
Table stakes. Gotta have
table stakes.
Table stakes now. I mean, I just think if you're not working in collaboration and you're not working, and we'll take, I think social and collaboration kind of get blurred together as they are the category, right? But I think social is a whole different way of sort of both, communicate with your internal workforce, and also there's a whole marketing, data, analytics, whole piece on that. And I would say on the collaboration piece, it is such a broad topic, but such such a critical piece in how you rethink how you're going to communicate. As I prepared for this, I asked my team on our internal sort of conversation system, without naming products, right? Is hey gang, what are the technologies that you care most about, that you're concerned with? This is emails. As much as email's not dead. I can tell you that just by my inbox.
Somebody told me it's for old people.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know.
But I don't
want to read too much into it.
Is that like over 32 or something? 26. Yeah.
But I think that you have to figure out how to do that and how to communicate differently with this workforce, how to attract a new workforce as you're sort of evolving here, and then how to get things done more efficient.
Is this a CRM thing, or is it just using other public and private social?
I think it's everything. I mean, I think it's pulling in the public social networks and APIs, and I think it's bringing in a conversation that used to be two-way or over email or 5 email conversation threads. God, I can't stand how many times I get thanks, right? And I do it myself, but how do you do that differently and change the way that a workforce needs to happen, and how you can get more thoughts or different thoughts? One of the best programs I had at the White House was an internship development program, and we built 40 apps in 8 weeks. Like, outstanding, blew the doors off of everything else, right? It only happened because the idea came from an intern. If you keep these traditional channels of communication happening, you're not going to get that. You're not going to be able to open up those conversations or those ideas. And And I think that there are just so many out there, and you have to be accessible. You have to create that. You have to explain problems and not know who is only the subject matter expert that can fix it.
Yeah, makes sense. Michael, Internet of Things. Or if you want to add comments to the collaboration piece.
I'll add the collaboration very quickly, and then let's talk about the Internet of Things. So I completely agree, Brook, that the notion of social and collaboration is table stakes. In fact, I go one step further and just add to it, which I'm sure you're basically articulating, which is it's going to be part of everything. So whether it's social CRM or it's social messaging or whether it's social commerce, I mean, name it, it's going to have social and collaborative.
Will we stop using social in like a few years because it's just default? Like social business, social, it's just, or
we'll stop using it when people stop getting funding on it.
Yeah.
It's just like when people walk in my office and they think cloud, is going to
right, cloud computing.
it's just too funny. So anyway, but there is one piece that is really exciting to me, and that is, again, what's not been possible before you had true social collaborative capabilities. And I think there are some really fundamental things that are still yet not fully developed. An example would be crowdsourcing design, for example.
Love that.
There's an example where products and services are being built by the customers for the customers in a collaborative, social and engaging form in a way that's dramatically reducing time to market, producing better products, reducing costs, and also ultimately even helping with go-to-market afterwards because people are buying what they've
Absolutely.
designed. That's dramatically groundbreaking.
I love that.
And so I think there's still some things that we haven't yet seen.
Sure.
That will come,
Sure.
Okay, so Internet of Things.
So actually, I'm sorry. I just want so there's this dimension of co-creation between the vendor and the customer, in effect working together, even if it's the vendor supplying a platform that the customer is then using and then interacting with the platform.
Exactly.
I was asked to rebrand our company in 90 days. Logo, color, typography.
You CMOs have all the fun.
No, 90 days wasn't fun, but anyway, we did that. So what did we do, Michael? We actually worked with an agency, put a bunch of designs to the public, and asked for folks to vote on our new mark and logo. And based on the feedback, we were able to actually morph and come up with a design based on crowdsourcing the project, and we were able to deliver a new brand in 90 days. So in the future, if I would do something different, I would probably crowdsource the whole thing, like the entire design. This was more of a help us with the selection process. But the input we received was stunningly good. It was really unbelievable. Yeah. And so the mark for Extreme Networks was based on a crowd input. So really truly believe the power of collaboration, which is not something we could have done maybe in the past. So Internet of Things.
Well, so let's talk about again. What my job is to try to identify what's going on today and project 10 years out. And if you think that's crazy, just remember that it takes me on average 8 to 9 years to get a company public to $100 million plus scale to being a real business. So I have to be thinking that far out. So what I see is very simple, which is if you look at the sort of trends that are behind this, they're as basic as this. It took 10 years for the mobile phone to get really broadly adopted. It's taken 3 years for the tablet to get broadly adopted. And it's taking months for devices to get as broadly adopted that are being used for everything from the quantified self to healthcare to production line measurement and sensing. So I just think there's an explosion, a swarm of devices coming. And we all know it and we sense it, but obviously what's implied behind it is what gets to be really interesting. So I think there are a couple of things that are really fascinating here. First of all, you can't possibly manage those devices the same way you manage PCs and mobile phones even. And look at how difficult it's been just for the enterprise to adopt the bring your own device movement. It's been really hard. Sure. And I know because I've got investments in it, and they're doing really well because it's a hard problem to solve.
Yeah.
Now multiply that by an order of magnitude again. I mean, we're talking about 50 billion devices probably in 10 years' time. So, at least an order of magnitude more than we have mobile phones. That's a huge, huge swarm to deal with. So, different management systems, different infrastructure, different means of collecting the data, different means of synthesizing that data, different implications in terms of, who accesses. You talk about privacy.
Yeah.
We're now on a different level when we get into this. So there are all sorts of challenges, and every time there's a big challenge or a major disruption, there's huge opportunity. So as an investor, of course, the next thing I have to remind you is that usually these things go in a cycle that looks like this. Huge boom, big bust, and then a really long build-out. Long being, and this is why we were talking about it earlier, so you pointed out, it's been 11 years since I held my first SaaS forum with CIOs. And the first one I heard, SaaS is great, but it's for small, medium-sized businesses. We're never going to adopt this. So I expect in about 10 or 12 years' time, we'll be sitting here talking about how the Internet of Things is actually coming to the enterprise. It takes that long. It just takes a long time for these things to go through this cycle.
Businesses have the talent and the skills. We talked about data scientists and data analytics as a core competency that IT needs to build, and marketing and other lines of business. With all these disparate management tools and the order of magnitude explosion of connected devices, from your Nest thermostat to your Fitbit to your Nike shoes to whatever, glass, iWatch, you name it. How do you retool? You have McKinsey saying there'll be 190,000 data analyst shortage in the U.S. by 2020. How do you build that competency within an organization, for example, as large as yours?
So I think the first opportunity here is not to think that a data scientist is going to solve this problem, or we have to hire someone for that job. I mean, I think my mindset has been is that as we go forward, we need to drive data as a core competency into every new hire and retrain and retool the workforce with this. Data and data curation and what you do with data. And gone are the days of I'm going to send you a spreadsheet and you figure it out, or here you go, right? Here's a dashboard, I put it up online. It's now this whole new mindset that we have to get a base level of analytics. And I think a core competency across our workforce and our nation here to be able to deal with that, to adapt to that, and to think about that. And then, as these tools get better, it happens because a data scientist is not going to be able to constantly switch between which area in the business. Is it someone's hiring better people, and the data around how you hire a better employee and how all your data feeds can do that? It's ultimately still going to be that person who knows that business to be able to curate, understand, and find that actionable piece of information.
And we have a question, and I'm sorry that I didn't see you. I'm aimed this way. So.
Are we live here? Yeah.
You are live as live can be.
Introduce yourself before.
Will do. Dwayne Dumont, Next Stage Medical. Thanks for taking my question. So I have a little bit of a long-winded question, so just bear with me, and probably CNN will have to fact-check me after or something. I don't know. But so my question's for Michael Skok, and you mentioned disruptive technology, and one of those for you might be crowdfunding, right? I think first, I guess, has it changed the landscape for you? Might slow things up for you? I don't know.
So you're asking whether or not crowdfunding, the impact on crowdfunding on his business
on his business specifically, that sort of thing. And let me get a second part, and then I'll step back and let you answer. So I think, and the reason I'll tell you why. The reason I bring this up is I think the stat was like 50% or just shy of 50% of the investment was coming in as seed and early stage investment for VCs. And so with crowdfunding, does that push you out into a later stage of funding potentially?
So Michael, the impact of crowdfunding on the VC business and you as an investor.
So I think this is a fantastic topic. I'll be crisp because we could have a whole afternoon on it. Yes, it's disruptive. Thank you for the question. There's no question at the low end for companies that wouldn't necessarily have found their way to the right VC. This is a good collaborative means for people to get access to capital and to get them going. No, I don't think it's going to put us out of business because good VCs are not about capital. They're about resources. And I can tell you that my scarcest resource is my time and energy and commitment to help build a company. And capital is a very, very small piece of that. The rest of it is the hard work associated with doing the hiring, the recruiting, the team building, the establishing the business model, figuring out how the channels to market. I'm going to go on and on. I teach a course on it actually, so it's a favorite topic of mine. But it's also a very positive thing in complement to VCs because, just as I was describing for crowdsourcing things like designs or product, etc., if you can get customers or partners or suppliers, and I've got many examples of this, to contribute to the capital of a company, they're effectively putting their money where their mouth is, potentially participate in usage of those products or services that might get built. And I think that's very positive. So I'm a big believer in the "and" of crowdfunding. I think it's a great thing. It is disruptive, and there's still room for the real hard work to still be done by venture capitalists on top of that. Did I answer your question? Good.
Great. You know, going back to, thank you so much for your question. Mary Fran?
Michael?
Did you have a question? You have a comment? Okay. So we were talking about data and analytics, and isn't there when you start infusing data and analytics through everybody in the company, like you were describing, isn't there an implication for the company's business model? I mean, I'm thinking this Friday on CXOTalk we have the Chief Digital Officer of GE Power and Water, and he's all about data. So there's this change in how the company can do business because of the data. So either of you, any thoughts on the impact of data on business model and company operations and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I think from every aspect, I think we're in that infancy stage right here on where the data is. I mean, every day I feel like once a day, once an hour, you hear a story about how data changed an experience, right? If it's your personal data, and I love to talk about sort of my jawbone and how it changed me as a sleeper, right? So I actually am incredibly mindful, and there was a personal thing or my running watch that helped me change and steady a pace and figure that out. But the same thing happens into companies. I think the gold mine in this new economy, in the demand-based economy, the gold mine in all this is the data inside our company and how we use that and how we first unleash it, protect it and store it and keep our users' privacy sacred here, but how we really figure out how to evolve from that and how we make either better product, new product, different system. I think that is critical. I mean, it's sort of, you hear often that any company out there, I heard recently a furniture company called a software company here, right? And that everybody's a software company now.
Software's eating the world.
Yeah, right. and I would say that, my prediction being that soon enough we're going to hear every company be a data company. Right, from your light and power to your utility to a beverage company or anything else. And I think the opportunity with that data is how to harness it, how to build on it, how to grow, and really it's unlimited potential.
Isn't that one of the benefits of digital business transformation, is that you can have better insight and build, perhaps in your case, predictive models to ensure student success? You've got flipped classroom, online courses, MOOCs, massive open online courses. So you should be able to look at the students' learning trajectory and habits, what apps they use, what online courses they take, and determine students that are at risk, and then put prevention methods to ensure.
Different resources to that. Yeah, I mean, I think the opportunity of data that is there. We released a product this year with the personal math trainer, and if you're not able to understand it in a simplistic example, 2 + 2, and you get 2 + 2 is 3 or 5, the answer is 4 for those who didn't get it. But you have an ability to either say, let's explain this differently. Maybe this is a video, maybe it's audio, maybe I have to explain it a different way. Let's try to get different resources, or maybe this is a time that you need human intervention, so on and so forth. The idea can go on, and we have tons of products coming out that have that ability, and products in the marketplace that are using data to help a better outcome.
Absolutely.
And that's the really exciting part of being in education right now, and really changing that, where technology is not going to solve the problem, but it's going to aid in better outcomes.
Michael and I surveyed CIOs in higher education, asking them to define success, and these were handpicked, some of the best CIOs in higher ed, and student acquisition, student retention, fundraising. What they listed as their success factors didn't have a lot or anything to do with technology. It was all about student success.
The business. It was the business conditions, and they were using data to predict which students might drop out, for example, because that's obviously has an impact on the student, and it also has an impact on the core business of the university, education and revenue.
Absolutely.
Mary Fran, are there questions from Twitter?
There are questions from Twitter, yes.
Oh, great.
As a matter of fact, it's from Dr. J. Alyssa Johnson, the Deputy CIO at the White House, has a question for Brook.
We have the White House watching
We have the White House
our
watching.
Boston event. Very cool.
And the question we want Brook to answer is, can the CIO and the Chief Digital Officer be one and the same?
Yeah, I think that's so first for the question, and hello to Dr. J. She's a dear friend, but I think that's a really good question. The Chief Digital Officer, depending on what circle you are in the world of CIO communication, the Chief Digital Officer is getting a lot of talk now, right? And I would say that, and if you go to your different sources, there's many different examples. Is this just a CIO and a CMO together? Is it a CTO, CMO? Is it a whole different thing, and the CMO and the CIO should report to the Chief Digital Officer? What I think is that in an organization, I think that again, the great thing about HMH is that we don't see that it's one person's job to drive a digital transformation. It's not certainly just my job, and frankly, that's why we're so far along in our transformation, and we're actually iterating in that, because I don't believe that the transformation ever ends. It's this iteration process, and I think in this world that you can solve that with a title, or you can solve that with a chief data scientist, but the idea is that it is an entire enterprise challenge. At HMH, we are all about how do we evolve, iterate, and move faster. Right. How do we connect through social and use data to make better products, and how do we do that? I do think that, look, as the leader of the technology team, it is my job to lead the technology, and I partner incredibly well with our Chief Digital Officer, and we have a
Chief Digital Officer.
No, sorry, Chief Marketing Officer, and we have an SVP of digital strategy, excuse me.
Okay.
And that partnership's really strong there. Awesome. But I think what's so critical, because it seems like most of the online writing is about this CDO will save us all, right? Yes. And I think it's all of us to save ourselves, and to lead this transformation together.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Michael, you talked about learning from failure and being excited about, you're no longer excited about investing in technology. Are you excited about investing in data and analytics?
Sure. So, I mean, this is a fun one because there's so much written about it. It's hard to say anything original, but I like to just compare and contrast before and after here. So, in the virtual world, it's very different. You can't see your customer. In the old days, they walked into the store, or you physically got a vision of your customer. So you sized them up, whether you realized it or not. You were making assessments of
sure,
what their creed or color or anything else was. In the virtual world, data is that definition of your customer.
Right.
And without that, you have no idea who your customer is.
So you're you're building up, in a sense, a 3D model of the customer based on the tracks, the digital tracks.
That is the only way you can see your customer.
Mm-hmm. So why is it when I walk into a retail store and I connect to their Wi-Fi and I start doing price checking with their competitors, they don't see that and insert a rebate in real time that says, we know you're in the store, we know you have a social footprint, so word of mouth marketing would be great if we land you as a customer. Here's a 15% rebate, buy the TV here rather than going to Amazon. Because all that technology exists. Yeah. So, I mean, showrooming is hurting a lot of retail stores, and yet they're not using the data to keep me as a customer. So,
well, you get right, and of course the smart retailers realize that.
Yeah.
That is the chief digital officer's job, is to make sure that
right.
all those technologies do come together. And part of the world of commerce that I live in, it's absolutely happening. I mean, this business of omni-channel,
right.
omnipresent, connecting with your customers, always on, wherever they are,
right.
and even if they're not in your showroom, then somebody else's.
Right.
Understand how to interact with them is critical. But anyway, so I think that's the data piece. There is no customer without data in the virtual world. There is no definition of customer. The second thing I want to point out is building on what Brook said, which is it's just a fundamental thing. It's so fascinating. Is that we talk about having this sort of like continuous relationship with our customer. Bullshit. I mean, you have no relationship with your customer. They're one click away from being your customer, your competitor's customer.
Yeah.
So
It's so true.
You can have the best product out there, the best service out there.
That's true.
Everything else is accessible to you immediately at the same time. But the loyalty you create with your customer is what we were starting to talk about earlier, is based on your ability to understand them better than your competitor. And again, that is data.
Yeah.
And so you're either going to find ways to serve them better through data, or you're going to lose them. It's that simple.
So we're almost out of time. We have a few minutes. And so how about if we close out by asking each of you, and also Mary Fran is the editor-in-chief of CIO Magazine, who has this tremendous overview, to share your thoughts and advice for CIOs who are observing what's going on and want to push this type of innovation further inside their own organization. Should we start with Brook? How's that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, so one, thank you for having me today. This was a lot of fun. I think that this new era, this new economy and new world that we live in is got to be a fast, quick, agile world. And that means that that for us, we've created a term called HMH Nimble, which is our own internal management system to take agile principles, just the broad principles, and apply it across everything. And I think that goes to so many different key points in how the new world works. Is that you can't think that you're just gonna that you'll take 18 months to deliver a product. Right. That you have to deliver working software quick. But you also have to be able to, you have to deliver stuff quickly to your customers every 3 months, and you have to iterate and change. And you got to embrace that this is a demand-based economy, and that if my customers demand cloud storage on their desktop, that I better respond quickly, or I'm going to be unresponsive. And that's the change. And that goes to the vendors too. In that whole vendor world, like, I'm not signing a 5-year deal anymore. Get it off my desk and think about it. 1, why isn't it on DocuSign? 2, let's get rid of the paper. And 3, let's think about, if you're not performing, then you should be gone. This should be that conversation, and it's a pay-as-you-go world. And I'm trying to build and deliver an iterative enterprise that can adapt to that pretty quickly.
Sorry, is it hard to do pay-as-you-go, or is it more? Are you more likely to have vendor lock-in with, let's say, a multi-tenant SaaS solution, like a CRM solution, where you implement, you integrate, you train? Yeah, okay. We'll leave that for the next CXO talk. But
great question.
I thought that was one of the 9 inhibitors. Yeah, so I read the slideshare very carefully. So
I mean, it's far be it for me to say what CIOs should do. What I hear when I spend time with CIOs is the biggest constraint you will have is that 80% of your budget is usually on just maintaining existing systems. So you've already heard my suggestion for that, which is if you can outservice anything that wouldn't be a core competency, then do so and take more of that 80% to the 20% plus, hopefully, to innovate. And then on the innovation piece, I would say the obvious, which is turn it on its head. Maybe it's not so obvious to point this out. I would look for things that you simply cannot do without the technology or product or service that you're introducing. And if you can do it, why are you doing it? Because the technology should be a distinct competitive advantage, and that's where your innovation should be going. It should be giving you something that you can take to the CEO and the boardroom and declare victory with, and show that you're making an impact on the top or bottom line of the company. If not, your job's at risk, and we all know that. It's just a changing world. You've got to be able to be accountable at that level.
Okay, so we have agility, we have focus on the core pieces that matter the most to the business. And Mary Fran, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. I actually have one thought that has floated up throughout the day, and it was exemplified when the CIO of Liberty Mutual's global specialty business talked about doing a hackathon. And I think that the millennial factor in here, the youngest and most innovative members on staff, I think that sometimes CIOs get so caught up in all of the senior business issues that are going on at the top of the company that they may be forgetting to take the time to turn around and let some problem loose amongst your youngest staff members, or some way to get the youngest people in your company, maybe the marketing and the IT staff together, and let them play at what they're doing. The fact that we have CXOTalk here live at the events was an idea from our millennial staff writer, Lauren Brissell. And Brook mentioned that one of his best ideas recently came from a younger member on the staff. I would just remember the innovative mindset that exists among the millennials and look into the hackathons. I think that I'm running into more and more enterprises that are doing it in a surprising array of businesses. I think that's one practical step I think everybody could try.
In 30 seconds, I'll just say one other thing to Mary Fran's is we did one recently, really great, and I would say everybody got really enthused. You know what I would tell you, the negative that came out of it was the other units, the non-tech teams were really miffed that they weren't involved, that they couldn't participate. And I think, don't think that technology only happens in a tech team.
Absolutely.
You know, unlock the power of your entire people.
Absolutely. Great advice.
So harness the passion.
Yeah.
The folks who care.
Technology's everywhere. We all are technologists now.
Yeah, adopt a beginner's mindset and embrace reverse mentoring, I think is important. One comment before we conclude. Michael and I are doing a CXO talk at Gillette Stadium Tuesday evening, and we are inviting the CIOs of the Celtics, the Bruins, the Red Sox, and the Patriots, as well as the CIO of the NFL, to talk to us about use of mobile, social, and apps and cloud to delight and improve the fan experience. It's at Gillette. It's a dinner event in CXO Talk. All of you are invited. If you're interested, just connect with me on Twitter or send me an email, and look forward to seeing some of you there on Tuesday. It's a pretty cool event. Pretty awesome CIOs who'll be there.
Yeah, if you're interested in sports and fan experience and technology, it's the place to be.
Absolutely.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, and especially thank you to our guests.
Awesome.
Thanks.
You're great.
Yeah.
Part of the live experience. All right.